this, I have my screen in front of me. So participants, you're an attendee. Welcome to the analyst. Okay, so now you're a panelist. I'm gonna make you a co-host. So you should be a co-host now, so you should be able to admit people.
Participants. Yeah, it's just you and I.
Do you see panelists and attendees?
Yes.
Two boxes, okay.
So now.
So as technical committee members come in, we'll want to promote them to a
So
panel.
where do you do that?
Well, let's wait till somebody joins,
Okay.
because you'll see the three dots beside their name.
Oh,
You
gotcha.
click on that and
And
say
then
promote to
right click
panelist.
on that, okay.
Yep,
We have to look at our faces or do we,
what's that?
do we have to look at our. See all the participant faces or
No, we don't.
stop video, is that what we heard or?
Yeah. Hey.
What it says on mine.
What's that?
Mine says view gallery and follow host view.
Oh, okay.
So we'll take it off that.
You can see it on the screen.
Says,
Oh, probably do speaker. Hey, Bill, what are you? Cheers. You can see my screen on your computer, right?
yeah, I can see the
Okay.
technical committee packet, yeah. Look at the panels. Yeah, white.
Yeah, you can promote a panelist because he has a presentation today. That's good. We have no Corey or Olivia today, so I'm gonna try to run the tech while I run the meeting. There, that's.
You want four of them?
I do.
Declined to be promoted to panelist,
Who did that?
Bob Christosh.
He probably doesn't know what he's doing. Sorry, Bob, if you heard that. We're promoting you to panelist, Bob, so that you can speak in the meeting.
in the meeting.
Looks like you have made it to the panelist side.
Thank you.
All right, we hear him. Thanks, Bob.
Awesome.
You're here. Let me bring it up. Okay. What's the question? It'll be from Colin. Why it took so long to get it.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Let's go.
Better order. Good. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's what. Yeah. Yes, I assume Stephen Hope's sitting in for Michelle Benton, so.
Yeah.
No. Great. I think it all through it. So you can promote us.
Oh, like that.
Oh, there it is. You moved over.
They put former Shirley Hilton into my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Stephen, just checking in with you. Are you sitting in today for Michelle Denton?
Yes, Jackson, I'll be doing that.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah. So it's 531. It's also on the wall of there.
Door.
Yeah.
What are you? What are you doing? Fine.
Oh, you talked about that. Oh, was she declined being panel?
Yeah.
Try it. Yeah, I didn't. She declines, we can also just hit that button, allow us to talk. Should sort change. Yes, that's with respect. So we can leave Megan and attendees for now. Yeah. Afternoon.
Wait, yeah, I took over.
Morning to me, good afternoon. That's DOT for construction. Labor. Yeah, technical committee member.
A Saloni,
That's Jenny, Lee.
someone.
Nope, next year. So we can leave on the 10 meter. Get started in about 1 minute, everybody. A little bit short-handed today, so we're just let everybody get into the meeting. Yeah, RJ's down to the technical committee. Promote him.
Yeah.
How you doing? Good. I like the sunglasses.
Yeah.
My wife likes the same brand, but I haven't seen the pattern.
I like those because I like the brown lenses and it's better for all the flat light.
So your committee's on balance today, everybody's.
How's your summer
Go
going?
on fire.
Feels like there's no transition.
So for RJ, I won't read
The winter street to
That's
summer
okay.
activities. Like we had
Oh,
our
wait.
last week curling and already in softball, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You said I'm unbalanced, that's right.
Yes,
You
you're
up at our
about-
Bonesville this
I
year?
misunderstood.
Make it, I think it was the same as club nationals.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Fast Lane Technical Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, May 7th, and the call to order is 12:02 p.m. For introduction of committee members present, I see we have with us Nick Zarnecki, Stephen Hoke sitting in for Michelle Denton, Kate Huber, Alexa Green, Brett Nelson, John Natardis, Bob Christash, Walker Ringstad, Bill Rogers, Kellen Spillman, and RJ Stump. Committee members that I believe are absent at this time include Michael Bradley, Justin Burgess, Lieutenant Mike Roberts, Jacob Toyrick, and John Weinberger. Are any of those committee members I listed as absent in the meeting? I just missed you.
Jacobs. I've done it.
Okay.
I'll want him to us.
Okay, so for the record, Jacob Toyrick has joined us as well. For Fast Planning staff, we have myself, Jackson Fox, and Deborah Todd. And then for guests in the meetings today, we have Don Galligan, Ben White, Sarah Lucy, Lauren Little, Megan Flory, Jennifer Wright, Yemi Alini, and Jack Barnwell. Is there any guest in the meeting that I missed announcing? Okay, hearing none, that's who we have with us today. Let's move on to approval of the May 7th, 2025 meeting agenda. Can I get a motion on the agenda? To approve by Bill Rogers. Is there a second? Second by Brett. Okay, any changes to today's agenda? Hearing none, anyone opposed to approval of the agenda as presented? Hearing none opposed, we'll consider the agenda approved, and that takes us to approval of the April 2nd, 2025 meeting minutes, which begin on page 2 in your packet. Can I get a motion on the minutes? Move to approve by Bill Rogers again. Is there a second? Second by Walker. All right, any edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing no edits to the minutes. Is there any committee member opposed to approval as of the minutes as presented in the packet? Hearing no one opposed, we'll consider those approved. That takes us to staff working group and chair report. Apologize for the scrolling, trying to do two things at once here today. Beginning on page 9 in the packet are the action items from the April 16th, 2025 policy board meeting. Just a few items to highlight here. They did adopt tip amendment number 1, including a late request to add $200,000 in funding for the design phase of the fast improvement program for the 2026 construction program. Also, the next motion there with a series of amendments, the board did consider hiring legal counsel to review the operating agreement edits provided to us by DOT. That resulted in a 3-3 vote, so the motion failed. So at this time, we will not be hiring an attorney to do a legal review of those edits. And just a refresher from their meeting a few months ago, they did table consideration of those edits indefinitely. So we'll not be looking at the operating agreement edits nor hiring an attorney to review them at this time. They also made a motion to reprogram the construction funding for Pearl Creek Elementary School to other existing scored projects. Included in that funding plan was once the project is de-obligated, which I expect that to occur sometime in the fall after the design is complete and the wetlands permit is secured, that funding would be carried forward to a big portion of that, the Chino Lake access via Plaque Road. So this funding that would be de-obligated in 2026 it'll basically be like an offset to us, and we'll need to spend it within that year. So it'll be applied to projects going to construction in 2026, and that frees up funding in 2025 and 2026 to initiate design starts for the next projects in the queue, which one of the biggest one is the design of the compressed natural gas fueling station for UAF, as well as more vehicle plugins for North Pole City Hall and the main parking lot at Pioneer Park. Let's see, they also reviewed the suggested edits by the technical committee to Fast Planning's bylaws and asked individual board members to send me their edits by May 1st. I only received one set of edits, which was a joint letter from Mayor Cruz and Jerry Cleworth. So I have combined the technical committee members' edits with Mayor Cruz and Jerry Cleworth's edits, and we'll review that as an action item here today. There are a few edits in conflict with each other that I'm hoping for some specific recommendations out of this committee on what you would recommend to the policy board moving forward, like an option A on some of those. They did approve the memorandum of understanding for performance measure planet target setting procedures, and they did take the technical committee's recommendation to postpone the letter to the EPA congressional delegation on transportation sanctions. And so that's back on the agenda today. That letter has been edited, and I believe it's now ready to advance to the policy board for approval and submittal later this month. Okay. Next set of action items, page 11 for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I believe I gave you a preview of this during our last meeting, but the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is asking to rename their committee the Walk and Roll Advisory Committee, or RAC, and they would like to add 4 new seats to their committee for representatives from law enforcement, the school district, transit, and people with disabilities. We do have, they also, at their more recent meeting here on April 24th, they also asked that their meeting frequency get reduced from monthly meetings down to every other month meetings. So on the agenda here today, you're going to see an updated roles and responsibilities document for this committee with all of their requested changes as indicated by these action items. And then my last update is we did receive communication from the EPA as far as the next steps we need to go through for the conformity freeze to be lifted for the Fairbanks and North Pole area. I won't run you through this entire letter that was provided to us, But the summary is that, EPA has approved the serious SIP motor vehicle emission budgets, which are more stringent than the moderate SIP emission budgets, which we used for our regional air quality emissions analysis. So now we have to rerun our travel demand model to look at emissions to see if we will meet those serious SIP motor vehicle emission budgets. And on the adequacy finding here, the notice will be published in the Federal Register tomorrow, May 8th. And then the following day, May 9th, I have scheduled an interagency consultation meeting to outline the scope and process for that work to rerun our travel demand model and update our regional emissions analysis to see if we will be below the emission budgets that were recently approved by the EPA. So this could be a couple month long process to go through here, but we do have our air quality consultant, Trinity Consultants, under contract with the state to do that work on our behalf. And so we'll be doing a kickoff meeting for that effort on Friday. And that meeting is open to the public if any technical committee member wishes to attend. That's the advertisement for that is on page 24 of the packet. And that concludes my staff working group and chair report. Are there any questions on any of those items? Some of which we'll discuss later in the week. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our public comment period. Is there any member of the public that wishes to provide testimony today on anything not listed as an action item on the agenda? If you're an attendee, you can raise your hand and we will manually unmute you. Okay, no one online? Anyone in person? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Move on to old business. Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, STIP Amendment number 2. We have Ben White with us here today to give us a presentation that was requested by the technical committee on fiscal constraint of the STIP amendment. Just to remind you all what the request was, I've highlighted that at the top of page 26 in the packet. This was in our comment letter, statement number 2. This is where the technical committee requested a presentation on fiscal constraint for federal fiscal year 2025. And that the STIP dashboard shows over $2.2 billion in funding program for federal fiscal year 2025, which is double the previous year's annual funding availability. And the committee would like to see details on where the additional revenue is coming from, what new projects have been added between STIP amendment number 1 and number 2 to raise that total up $1 billion over the previous year, and whether there is sufficient state match to cover doubling the annual program. And I just want to remind you all that this motion came up by the technical committee after seeing these graphs on the STIP amendment website, which shows circled there in the bottom is that $2.2 billion in investment for this year. So Ben, I'm going to give you the floor for the presentation. I don't know if you have slides or if you're just going to speak to the questions posed by the committee.
No, I think, thanks, Jackson. I think if you just leave that up on the screen, we can kind of work through that a little bit. Don't have any formal presentation, just try to answer the questions that were proposed or put forward to us back in March. And just a reminder to everyone that this isn't a formal response to comments. I believe if you haven't received a formal response, they're in the works. And so I'll run through this, try to explain what I can and try to take back some questions that I can't answer to get you guys more information. But essentially, one of the things that we're looking at here, we've got a dashboard. This is coming from the STIP's website for public notice for STIP Amendment 2. The dashboard was to try and give a little bit of a graphical representation of the difference between STIP Amendment 1, STIP Amendment 2. And so what you see in here, and the reason why there's a change from STIP Amendment 1 to STIP Amendment 2 is largely because we have to go in and try and true up, as we do amendments, we true up the past fiscal year or the current fiscal year. So at the time, we were truing up everything in fiscal year 24. And then things that don't get, projects that don't get moved forward or programs that have remaining funds can move into 25. So there's a carryover function that happens. And so you'll see some carryover of projects that didn't get moved out in 24. We intend to program them in 25. So that's some of the increase that you see going from 24 to 25. And if you look at the chart, you see a little bit of a decrease from 24 in STIP Amendment 1 to STIP Amendment 2. So a lot of that's just truing up. The other things that have caused the change in the function, the big chunk of it is some FTA grants that came in for AMHS. And so this is our Tustamina replacement ferry. There's some FTA grants for AMHS that have come in, and I believe it came in around 200,000 to 300,000 or so. I don't know the exact numbers right off the top of my head, but there was some FTA grants that came in, and so those were incorporated in STIP Amendment 2 so that we could get that funding programmed. And so that's another increase that we've gotten. And then going through some other things that have popped up, we've got some BIA tips, some tribal transportation funds. So there's other programs and projects that are being incorporated into the STIP that you see a little bit more of this coming in this year. So it's, and I may have misspoken. I may have said 300,000. It's millions. So we're not getting a new ferry vessel for a 200,000. It's going to be in the millions. So there's quite a bit of funding there coming in from FTA and other things. So that's the big picture. I think we'd have to go down and I'd have to do a much deeper dive into what's going on with the specific projects. But with those added increases to our federal grants, our FTA grants, there is an increase to state match that's necessary. And so that's what we're working through right now with our capital program asks and requests in the legislature, because with every federal funding opportunity, there's a various amounts of state match required. Most of our federal highways program is kind of a 10 cents on the dollar request. So we're all used to the 90.3% or the 9.3% that we've got to pay and match. In some of the FTA grants, it's 80-20. And so just depending on the grant itself, we're going to have a different amount of match that comes with it. And so you can imagine increasing a budget by 300, 400, 500 million in federal grants. We're going to have to match that with state dollars. And so that's the request that's going in. So that's the other thing that you see here is the reason why the overall budget increases is because it's the grants and then the match on top of it. And so, and then the upper part of the graph, the total and projects and programs is from Amendment 1 to Amendment 2. There's been, again, some truing up, some look at the database and looking at the projects. There's been some new programs and projects introduced strictly because of the grants and tribal funding that's come in. But these are our internal strategic investment strategies. And so the software package that we're using to put the STIP together and develop all the dashboards and everything that you see, it's a work in progress. And so you're seeing the one category I know that a lot of folks have keyed in on is this not applicable. It doesn't quite fit the other strategic investments. Some of those were situations where we had it fit multiple strategic investments. So you could have a project that was both safety and resiliency. And so now this in STIP Amendment 2, the data breaks down because we've actually been able to program some of these in the appropriate categories. And we've had more time since STIP Amendment 1 to go in and refine the program and the software that we're using. So that's kind of why you see the change in the programming, and there's an increase of programs and projects because of some of the new grants that have been added to the STIP. And so I think I'm trying to think, Jackson, of some of the other questions and comments that came in March. But I could just open it up to questions. The other thing that we're working on, and I was going to pull up the fiscal constraint tables that we have in there. So there is a section within the public comment period, the public comment website, where you can get into the specific fiscal constraint tables where we go through and do an analysis. I didn't want to scroll through and give everyone nausea as I'm scrolling through the screens. But essentially, we've got tables down in summary charts where you can compare fiscal constraint of the revenue that's coming in and what our anticipated obligations are for that year. And it's broken out by year. We've got different tables for statewide. And different tables for both MPOs, FAST and AMATs. And so what we've been doing is going through and trying to reconcile those fiscal constraint tables with our project managers, with our MPO partners, with the TIPs, and we call it the PDP, the project delivery plan is the system that's feeding into the STIP. And so we're going through and reconciling all of that so that the fiscal constraint tables and summary tables match what's anticipated in our TIP. And so I know I'm more familiar working with AMATs and their TIP. We've been going through reconciling both the TIP and our fiscal constraint tables now since December. We've been going back and forth, working on trying to get all that reconciled. And so that's the other component of this, is going through those fiscal constraint summary tables and trying to make sure that everything matches up. And it's an exercise I know we're still working on, trying to get all of that reconciled. So I'll take a pause. I just unloaded a bunch on you. And if there's any questions, I'll do my best.
Thank you, Ben. All right, committee members, is there any question on the information provided or the original request for this presentation? Go ahead, Cal.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'm gonna be honest about at least half of what you said kind of went over my head. Let me try to ask a question back to you and see if my understanding's appropriate. So mostly looking at that fiscal year 2025, showing the 2.2 whatever billion dollars. We think that it is technically accurate, but it's kind of an anomaly because of like rolled FTA funds, tribal transportation funds, and the other things you mentioned. Is that a decent summary?
Yeah, I think, the easiest way to explain this to folks is if you look at the STIP over a 4-year period of time, we get approval from Federal Highways and FTA for 4 years of funding, and we can move money around within those years through amendments. And so as 1 year ends, we try to true up that year with an amendment, and the carryover gets into the next year. And so I'm anticipating that in the next year, you'll see another STIP amendment where we're going to have to true up 25, and you may see funds from 25 moving into 26. And so we kind of look at the STIP in a 4-year cycle. And so money can move around from year to year, just depending on project delivery. And we run into situations, and the feds are fully aware of a lot of the situations that cause projects to slip or be delayed. And so that's the big chunk of this, is just trying to true up what our obligations were in 24, carrying over what unused 24 funding into 25, and then capturing the new funding that has come in since STIP Amendment 1.
Fundamentally, Don, this is more low with DOT. The biggest driver of that bump is FTA discretionary grants that came through.
Yep.
Okay.
That was when we looked at the numbers and the fiscal constraint. That is why that's so much larger.
So again, if I can try to summarize it again, so it is accurate, but a bit of an anomaly for various reasons.
Yep.
All right, any other questions from committee members?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Ward, just one more time, so if I understood what you said, it's likely in the next couple of months, we'll see another amendment to push some of that 2.2 billion out to, federal fiscal year 2026. Do you have an estimate of how much that would be?
Oh, no, what we would do is wait till the next amendment, and I'm not sure. There's been discussions of whether we start a new step. The department's looking at moving towards a rolling step. You guys may have heard this from other presentations, but in some states, they're doing a new step every 2 years as opposed to 4 years. And so that reduces the amount of amendments necessary. And so we're still discussing and trying to figure out all the mechanisms for doing this. I would anticipate that we would not probably start an amendment until probably closer to the fall, when we have a better sense of what 25 looks like. Our fiscal year ends September 30th. And so by August, we'll have a much better picture of what 25 looks like for obligations and funding. And so things that may not happen in 25, we'll know by the end of August what that's looking like. And so I would anticipate that the next amendment that would come out sometime fall, winter, if it's a new amendment or a new step, what you would see the carryover going from 25 to 26 that we didn't get programmed.
This is Lauren again, just chiming in. At this time, for the federal highways program, we are on track to fully obligate all of our annual funding, as well as fully capture roughly 126 million of August redistribution.
All right, last call for committee questions. Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ben.
Nope, appreciate your time and appreciate what you guys do.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the fast planning bylaws review. Again, the technical committee, this begins on page 29. Took a look at our bylaws during last month's meeting and suggested changes to advance to the board. The board did review those changes. They didn't necessarily have any comments on the proposed changes, but the board wanted to have individual board members submit their comments to me as well to combine with technical committee edits. The only set of comments that I received was a joint letter from Mayor Cruz and Jerry Clearwood. And so I have added all those edits into this document combined with a technical committee. What I'm going to do is kind of run through the edits and show to you where we need to have a decision point. And then I think following this introduction, I think the best way to handle this would be to entertain a motion to approve the edits as presented in the packet. And then after we have a main motion on the table, committee members can offer up amendments for some of those decision points, so that we can advance this back to the policy board later this month. Okay, so page 29, simple edit at the bottom there. Since we have two transportation planners at fast planning now, it's just making that plural, so to speak. So a transportation planner is designated as the assistant secretary. On the next page, so this is section 6 of Article 2. This was one that we highlighted at the technical committee. We didn't understand which committees this referred to, whether it was our Bike and Ped committee or in Project Enhancement Committee, or if this was special committees that are opened up by the policy board. We are recommending that and I think the technical committee recommended this at the last meeting, simply removing this section from the bylaws because there is a later article that discusses committees, and we can get into the granularity on that then. Let's see, nothing on the next page, so page 32. At the top there, this was a request by Mayor Cruz. He would like to have the public comment period limited to 5 minutes per speaker. And I think this is specific to the policy board, not necessarily the technical committee. But rather than having an open-ended comment period, which the chair can set a time limit or allow speakers to go over that. In any event, this is a request from Mayor Cruz to establish a time limit of 5 minutes. Below that, for records, these are the edits that were offered up by the technical committee at our last meeting with regard to the minutes and recordings of our meetings that are maintained on our website as public record, and that will post those 2 days after the meeting occurrence. And then below that is this committees section where, again, if we delete section 6 of Article 2, we can add in whatever language we would like underneath Article 7 here. One thing that's confusing about this section of the bylaws is this referring to the technical committee and bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee and project enhancement committee? Or was this section meant for special committees of the policy board? You know, so for example, the policy board could have established a bylaws review committee amongst board members or any individuals they would want to assign. So committees that are stood up for a discrete purpose that meet, say, 3 times, and then their committee is concluded. Or does this refer to our, again, our standing committees that meet monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly? And I think that we could shape this to fit the latter, so fit the technical committee, bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, and project enhancement committee. But we would have to make some language changes to make that clear. We'd have to spell that out that this article applies to those 3 committees. Within this section here, there's a new section 5. Mayor Cruz and Jerry Clayworth would like to see chairs for all of our committees come from the committee membership. So no longer allowing staff to serve as chair or vice chair of the committees. Currently, we have staff on all 3 of the committees serving as chair or vice chair, as you know, elected by those committees. So this new section that's written is in conflict with current practice and in conflict with Article 8, the next article. So we'll have to discuss that as a decision point for this committee, what your recommendation is. And then there's this new section 6 that every 2 years, the policy board will review the work of the committees as well as attendance and ascertain if they should be continued, modified, or discontinued. Okay. Next page, this is for the technical committee. Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleaver wanted to add in maintenance as a category of representatives. But as you look down the list of the organizations that have seats on the technical committee, it's very specific as to which department that those representatives come from. And so, like, for example, for the city of Fairbanks, there's 2 seats for engineering. So if we were adding the maintenance representative, we would need to say engineering / public works, something to that effect, so that, because right now, maintenance representatives would not necessarily come from these departments that are identified in that committee list. Then next page, page 34. We added in language here from a comment from the technical committee that outlines the technical committee's authority to have any seat on the committee can send in a substitute or a proxy for them to vote on behalf of their organization, should they be absent. So I added in this language, but in the comments from Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleaver, they do not want to allow proxies for this committee. And then section 10, they want Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleaver want to raise quorum for these meetings from 7 people up to 9. And so both of those are decision points to discuss later on here. And then the next page, page 35, this is a new section added by Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleaver, that attendance is important and any seat not filled for 9 consecutive months would be taken off of the membership list. I think the only 2 seats at this time that would apply for that would be our tribal representative and our freight representative would be removed from the committee. Since I believe it has been over 9 months since someone has sat in those seats. And then, just some cleanup language underneath the conflict of interest policy at the bottom of this page. And grammar correction on the next page. Page 37. At our last meeting, we discussed updating the code of ethics policy for the American Planning Association. There was previously a citation in there for the 1992 version. However, that code of ethics policy was updated in November 2021, so adopting the new code of ethics policy by the American Planning Association. Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Clayworth do not want to adopt that code of ethics policy, and simply well, you can see the language they added there. The fast planning and its members are required to follow state statute. I think that refers to the Open Meetings Act and conflict of interest policy. And members must adhere to confidentiality requirements and conflict of interest rules. And board and committee members must engage in civil discourse at all times and treat members of the general public and each other with proper respect. So basically, we would not have a code of ethics policy for our bylaws if we accept that new language. And then at the bottom, let's see here. Yeah, standards of conduct. So section 2 of Article 11. Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleworth are recommending that section 2 just be deleted because it's already covered by the Code of Ethics article above on the same page. And then page 38, I believe this is the last page. This was one of my recommendations at our technical committee meeting last month to simply move this section of Article 11 up to Article 2, members and officers of the policy board, as it directly relates to legislative appointments of assembly and council members to that board. If you would like to read the letter from Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Clayworth, it does provide some additional background on their requested changes. That is on pages 40 through 42. And then on page 43 is the updated code of ethics from the American Planning Association, which we had proposed to adopt as an attachment to our bylaws. So that's just in there for your reference. Okay, I'm going to go back to the beginning of this section here. And again, we're going to have a public comment period here shortly, and then I'll entertain a motion. But I think the best way to handle this action item is to have a motion to approve the changes presented in the document, and then have the technical committee make individual motions for amendments for some of those decision points where language is in conflict with each other. But I will entertain any questions committee members have at this time. Okay, thank you. All right, any committee member questions? Yes, Kellen.
Yeah, my questions right now are specific to. It's on page 4 of 11. So I guess it's Article 7 committees. I just want to make sure I'm reading this right, because the section below there is on the technical committee specifically.
Yes.
Is it the intent of this section, Article 7, to cover all committees? Some committees, all except the technical committee?
So that's what's unclear. This language came from the original bylaws in 2003. And at that time, we didn't have any other committee other than a technical committee. Yeah. I'm assuming the vision of that was for, special committees that are stood up by the board from time to time. So again, if, we would either just remove this section entirely and just talk about the technical committee, or we would tailor this article to directly refer to the technical committee, bike and ped committee, and project enhancement committee.
And correct me if I'm wrong, follow up if I may.
Yes.
The bike and ped committee and the project enhancement committee are included in our policies and procedures, right?
Correct, the roles and responsibilities documents, which. Yeah, the technical committee, your guys' roles and responsibilities are in the bylaws. But these advisory committees are not in our bylaws. So
Okay.
there's definitely a coordination issue there. They're not being treated the same.
Okay, so that's definitely something we need to work out before we approve this, right? Just some clarifying language on who this covers.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think we can discuss that further after we have a motion on the table. The board was also clear that this is not, these edits are not time critical. The technical committee can take as much time as they'd like, you know, over, say, the next few months to, or say, task staff with rewriting the section and bringing it back to you and at the June meeting. So, you know, whatever you would all like. So there's nothing time certain about this effort. But they would like to see what you think of the policy board edits at their next meeting. All right, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item here today? If you're an attendee, try to raise your hand and we can manually unmute you. Anyone online? Deb? Anyone online? Anyone in the room? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public comment period and I will open the floor for a motion. Yes, Bob, you have a motion?
Yes, I would move to adopt or move to approve the changes as adopted or as presented in this document.
All right, thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Is there a second? All right, second by Bill Rogers. Okay, so that's the main motion. We can open up discussion and any amendments by technical committee members you'd like to see where some of these edits might be in conflict with each other. And those, just to kind of highlight them again, the edits would be related to the committee chairs coming from the committee membership. That's one decision point. Another decision point is whether or not to allow proxies at the technical committee. Adding in maintenance personnel to the technical committee membership. Raising the quorum requirement. Oh, Bob? Did you raise your hand again?
Yeah, yes. Go ahead though, continue with your.
Okay. Let's see here. And then I think really the last one is whether or not to remove the American Planning Association Code of Ethics from the bylaws and not have a code of ethics policy within the bylaws. So that's another decision. So anyway, I'm done there. Folks can pick whichever topic you'd like to start with. And Bob, I
Yeah.
still have your hand up?
Yes,
On next.
so Article 7. Section 5,
Yes,
I changed that to read, committee chairs will come from the committee membership with the exception of the technical committee.
thank you for that amendment. Is there a second to that amendment? Second by Walker. Okay, did you want to speak to that at all, Bob, or? it's
Well,
pretty self-explanatory?
I think it makes it consistent now. You know, it's obviously in the technical committee, you know, you being the chair, you're not on the technical committee. So with this change, it makes everything consistent.
Think about. All right. Any further discussion on it? Oh, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the amendment. Do the other committees that are out there right now, are they chaired by members of FAST, or are they chaired by committee members currently?
So the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is chaired by a committee member, Kim Streeter, but the Project Enhancement Committee, I am the chair.
Okay, a follow-up question, if I may.
Yes.
It's my opinion that that FAST, the FAST employees that chair these committees, they do a substantial amount of work, especially for this technical committee. Is it kind of the same level of effort that you put in for chairing the other committees as well?
I would say no. Being chair of the Bike and Ped Committee or Project Enhancement Committee is really not that big of a lift. I would say being chair of the Technical Committee is a much heavier lift. So
Okay, so it's
actually
not
would-
asking as much from the it's not asking an inordinate amount of workload from a committee member.
No, not for those other committees. In the Project Enhancement Committee, they only meet quarterly. So, and now the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee wants to meet every other month. So again, it's just not as heavy of a lift as technical is. So at the staff level, I support Bob's amendment, but I shouldn't be stating my support or opposition for things, but I'm okay with this.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Walker.
Would it be more helpful if we just change it specifically for the policy board rather than the exception of the technical committee?
I guess I'm not.
Like a committee chair would come from the committee membership for the policy board rather than all the other committees, rather than with the exception of the technical committee, like just changing that. So the staff's looking beyond the committees for the other committees rather than.
Well, I think we would just delete this section if we were gonna go that route, because the policy board, I think in their section of bylaws, they pick amongst board members for their chair and vice chair. If section 5 was removed entirely, then it would allow staff to serve on all three, if the committees elected us.
Okay.
Yes, Kellen.
I guess I support Bob's amendment, but the thing I'm still wrestling with is, I think the question we probably need to answer first is, what is the purpose of this article? Do we want it to cascade into the technical committee, which has its own section with quite a bit more direction and restrictions? Or do we want it to be just all the other committees, the two that are in the policies and procedures, and then the ad hoc ones that pop up? So I think in my mind, that question needs to be answered before we make an amendment to section 5 to exclude the technical committee. And I don't know what other people are thinking. I guess I kind of have minor thoughts both ways on whether this should apply or shouldn't apply to the technical committee.
Well, I'd like to hear some of those thoughts
Okay.
on what committee members think that this section should apply to, which committees.
I guess I'll start. So my knee jerk was, this shouldn't apply to the technical committee because they have their own section and it's significantly more detailed on everything they have to do. But in looking there, like specifically Article 4, I don't think that cascades when it's talking about notice according to state statute. Correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have that repeated in the technical committee section. Oh, we do. Sorry, I just caught my own error. It's now Article 14. So sorry about that. So I guess maybe I'm leaning towards just changing the title of the article to other, something along the lines of other standing committees and ad hoc committees.
Okay. Well, we still need to deal with the amendment that's on the floor, but yeah, so hold that thought. And Nick, did you have some input?
No, it's on a separate subject, so let's deal with this amendment first.
At least my intention here, personally, I'm probably gonna vote down the amendment, although I do support the amendment. But I think we could do it by saying just this whole section doesn't apply to the technical committee.
So you're intending to make an amendment after we call roll on this amendment that's on the floor?
Yeah, but I don't have great language right now.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment to modify section 5 to read committee chairs will come from the committee membership with the exception of the technical committee? Okay, seeing no further discussion on the call roll on the amendment, starting with Bob,
Yes.
Walker.
No.
Bill,
Yes.
Kellen,
No,
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob,
no,
Nick,
No.
Steve,
No.
Kate,
No.
Alexa. I don't know if Alexa can speak. We'll skip her for now. Brett? No. Yeah, you could also write your vote in the chat, Alexa, if you can't speak. Okay, so Brett was a no. All right, John?
Yes.
I think the no's have it. Okay, so that amendment fails, and would you like to, okay, Kellen's gonna make a new amendment.
yeah, so I think this will clear things up, and I think Bob and Bob's suggestion is still in there, and I'll point that out, but my amendment is to change the title of Article 7 from committees to other standing and ad hoc committees, excluding the technical committee.
Okay, we got it. Is there a second to that amendment? Second by Brett. Okay, go ahead, Kellen.
Yeah, I'll speak. I think this just, it really clears things up. From what I can tell, I haven't went through this with a fine tooth comb, but everything I think here is repeated down lower in the technical committee section, including what Bob was getting at, which is covered in section 5 of the technical committee section, where it clearly says the technical committee shall elect a chair or vice chair from its members or staff,
Yes.
including the executive director. So I think that's all there. I think this will just clear up some confusion. It'll show it does cascade into our 2 standing committees, BPAC and Project Enhancement, plus whatever ad hoc committees like the Art Selection Committee or the Winter Maintenance Subcommittee, like all the other things we've formed over the years that are useful, but just, again, not clearly covered in here.
Thank you, Kellen. Further discussion or debate? Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll speak in support of the amendment, in addition to everything that Kellen just said. Section 6 particularly has me worried. That gives the policy board the authority to discontinue the committees, and I don't know if it's appropriate to give the policy board the authority to discontinue the technical committee. And there's not a lot of sideboards built into section 6, so they could do it with little justification. And so that's just another, I think, another reason to be supportive of the amendment.
Thank you, Nick. Further discussion or debate? Okay, seeing that, I'm gonna go ahead and call roll on the amendment, starting with Kellen.
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob? Yes. Nick,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
and Alexa again. Did she vote in the chat on the last one? Oh, Alexa raised her hand. Can you hit allow to talk?
Okay,
Trying to get you.
I don't know. She doesn't give you that. She should be allowed to.
Firewalls. Oh, looks like. Try to go ahead and vote, Alexa, if you can. It looks like you can speak now. Okay, well, we'll skip over Alexa for now. Brett? Yes. John? Yes. Bob?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
And Bill?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, are there any other amendments? Yes, Kellen?
It may seem like a minor one, but I would like to amend Article 5, Section 3. So right now it reads as presented, the length of the public comment period will be 5 minutes per speaker. Public comment period will be closed when all speakers have had an opportunity to comment before the policy board. So I'd like it to read the length of the general public comment period and public comment period on each action item will be 5 minutes. Continue.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Yes, okay, Walker's our second. All right. Go ahead and speak to it.
Just to clean up in my mind, I think this was the intention of Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleworth. As we know, the devil's in the details, and we've changed our process now that we take public comments as each action item comes up.
Yes.
It just adds the specificity to that.
Thank you, Count. Any discussion? Yes, Bill?
Can you repeat the amendment one more time, please?
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
So the first sentence would now read, the length of the general public comment period and public comment on each action item will be 5 minutes per speaker.
Hey, Nick, you got your hand up?
Yes, I have a question or clarification for this section. Because it does say mention policy, that policy board specifically at the end where it says that speakers will have had an opportunity to comment before the policy board. Is this only applicable to the policy board as written and as amended?
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment? Okay, I don't sense this to be a controversial one, so I'm just gonna ask if there's any committee member opposed to the amendment. Okay, hearing none, we'll consider that amendment approved. Are there any other amendments to the bylaws? Nick, go ahead.
Can I ask a clarifying question before proposing an amendment?
Yes.
Section 10, where they talk about designated proxies under, and I believe that's under Article 8 for the technical committee. As it's written, does that allow proxies to be designated and allow proxies to vote at the technical committee?
Yes, it does. And this is an addition from last month's technical committee meeting. This is something that we had in practice, but it wasn't in our bylaws.
Oh, good.
So
Okay.
the committee has already added this. However, Mayor Cruz and Councilmember Cleworth would like this removed. And they would not
Okay,
like it
so
to be
that's, That's where I was confused. Okay, so we added that and then the policy board, Mayor Pruz and Mayor Cleworth would like that removed. And do we need to address their comment at all or,
Yes, I think it would be extremely helpful if the technical committee made a motion on this topic today, whether you would like to keep proxies or remove proxies. Just so that the policy board is clear on this topic, what the committee would
yeah,
like to see.
I guess I could, I'd like to make a motion then to address the comments on why we would like to keep proxies. And
Can you make a motion in support or in opposition to it so that,
oh, yes, I make a motion in support of adding section 10 that keeps proxies.
okay, is there a second to that motion? All right, John Ataris. Okay, go ahead and speak to it.
So, I think that from just a programmatic and operational point of view, especially from the agency's perspective that sit on these technical committees, we take the work very seriously. And as part of that, there's not just one person that is kept up to speed on these technical committees. We have multiple people at DEC that are kept up to speed so that we can participate and add value to every meeting, because it's not realistic to, expect just one person to have their schedule so that they can make every one of these meetings. And so we have it set up on our end so that we can keep, keep folks up to speed and add value to the meeting with the proxies. And I think it would be a good idea to keep that.
Any discussion or debate?
Jackson, can I see on the screen here, the exact changes that were suggested by Mayor Pruz?
So is section 10 there highlighted in pink, the new red language? So the technical committee, suggested that we add this new section. And Mayor Pruz and Councilmember Cleworth are proposing to remove it. Yes, Kate?
I guess, if we remove section 10. Specifically allowing proxies, as mentioned, it's been our practice to allow that. Will there be something added that specifically denies the use of having an individual from the same organization sitting?
I don't believe so. In the past, before we became a 501c3 nonprofit, we did allow proxies for the policy board, and it was written in their section. And to resolve that, the board simply removed that because we cannot have voting members of the policy board that are not on the board of directors of the corporation. Yes.
Just to follow up, it's okay. I understand the desire not to have proxies at the policy board. That makes sense to me, but I would echo what Nick said. As far as technical committee representation, agree it's not reasonable that we can make every single meeting, but we do want to be engaged and represented. And while I think most organizations are pretty good about having the same individual at most meetings, it is helpful to know that we can allow someone else to come in our absence if it's planned. So I also am in support of keeping section 10.
Okay. John?
I'm in support of keeping it. DOT keeps multiple people up to speed, like Nick said, and Kate said. 3 potential proxies are behind us right now in the room. They have been proxies. So they're here now listening, keeping up to speed.
and it just helps us function more. And they cited in their letters, like Leaworth letters. There's occasions where proxies are used for political purposes, which should be avoided. We're not doing that. We're technical committee. We're just here, looking at the things we're supposed to and getting the work done. That's it.
Thanks, John. Further discussion? Kellen?
Just one question, one maybe interesting question, so I remember having this section under the policy committee or policy committee that we call it at the time, and then removed that, which is the policy board. But their section's silent on it, our section's silent on it, so technically right now, per the bylaws, we probably shouldn't be allowed to have proxies, right?
Perhaps not. But it's known common practice. There hasn't been any objection to date until now. But yeah, so this is something that we need to resolve. We need a decision from the board on this.
So I'll conclude that by speaking in favor of keeping section 10 as written.
Okay, let's go. Further discussion on the amendment, keep section 10.
I got a can opener for that can of worms.
So Jackson,
Yes.
are proxies allowed on the policy board?
No. Discussion. Okay, I'll call the roll then. Let's see, I'll start out with Nick,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
try Alexa one more time.
Yes,
We heard you, thank you.
success,
All right,
thank
Brett.
you.
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Bob, Walker,
Yes.
Dave, Bill,
Yes.
Kellen,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
and Jacob. Yes. Okay, that passes. Okay, appreciate you all working through this pretty quickly. We do have a long agenda. Any other amendments folks want to see? I really think the last one that needs a decision point is on the code of ethics, whether or not we adopt the American Planning Association's code of ethics, or not have a written code of ethics. This is on page 37. Unless there's anything else that committee members would like to amend. Yes, Kellen.
Another amendment, if I may.
Yep.
I'm looking at Article 8. Article 8, proposed section 16. It's on page 7 of 11. So right now it reads, attendance is important. Any seat that has not been filled for 9 consecutive months will be taken off the membership as cited in section 4. My motion is to change that language to any seat that has not been filled for 9 consecutive months shall be reviewed by the policy board to consider an alternative member or removal from technical committee membership.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Second to that amendment? All right, Bill. Speak to account.
I just want to make sure we're being deliberate about something. I agree with the intent that Mayor Pruse and Councilmember Cleworth cited. I just don't want to accidentally do something. Like if there's a reason that seat hasn't been filled, like maybe we haven't identified the right person for the seat or whatever it may be. I completely get it and agree with removing that. Let's just be deliberate about it and have a conversation and make sure we want to do that rather than it just disappearing.
Okay, please, Kellen. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, question on or clarification here. is the term filled in this sense, does that mean that there has been a specific person appointed for that seat? Or does this mean that if somebody has been appointed, if they haven't been able to attend and that they have 9 consecutive months where they haven't attended, that this will be considered?
Yeah, I believe this refers to seats that have an appointed individual.
Okay, so it's attendance. It's not if for some
Yes.
reason we can't appoint an
That's
individual.
how I interpret this is it's related directly to attendance.
Okay.
Yes, Kate?
For the 2 seats you mentioned this would affect, are there people that have been appointed that don't attend, or they've not been people appointed to this?
The tribal representative, there is no appointment at this time. The freight representative, there is an appointment, but that individual has, with some family issues, has not been able to attend. But there is a designated person for that. Person just has not yet returned.
Just
Yeah,
to further speak to this, as written. Let's say this goes through, like, I think that freight seat is a valuable seat, especially when we were doing the freight plan, they were incredibly valuable. If this goes through, that person's not there for 9 months, that seat's off of the technical committee. We would need to do another bylaw amendment to add that seat back in. So again, I just want to be deliberate if we're really taking seats off of there.
Thanks, Kelly. Further discussion. Okay, I think that this is a pretty benign change. So I'm just gonna ask, is there any committee member opposed to that amendment?
Yes.
You're opposed?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the amendment? Can you read it again?
You
You
got
like
it.
me to read it?
Yep.
So this is specific to section 16 of Article 8 on the technical committee. The language as written is attendance is important. Any seat that has not been filled for 9 consecutive months will be taken off the membership list cited in section 4. The proposed amendment is any seat that has not been filled for 9 consecutive months shall be reviewed by the policy board to consider an alternative member or removal from technical committee membership.
Okay, I'm gonna call roll. How's that? We're gonna go back to the original one. So let's see, we'll start with Kellen.
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Alexa,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
John,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
and Bill.
Yes.
Okay, that amendment passes. Any further amendments? Yes, Kellen.
I get it. So if I'm understanding correctly, you'd like us to weigh in positively or negatively on the suggestion to take out the AICP Code of Ethics and Conduct.
Yes,
Okay. I will make a motion. I would like to see the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct remain in the bylaws, but also keeping the addition under that in section 1, article 10.
okay. Is there a second to that motion? Yes, Brett. Okay, Brett is the second. All right, would you like to speak to that, Kellen?
Yeah, I guess I'll just start off. I'm probably the only one at the table that's governed by the AICP Code of Ethics regardless of this. They are long, but they are pretty simple. And it starts off by saying our responsibility is to the public. Number one responsibility is to the public. It goes a little bit deeper than that. I do think it is an important document, while a lengthy document. Again, there's kind of appeal processes and everything to go through with ethical standards. I've been through several of those. But again, we're a planning organization. I just want to kind of tie it back to that. We have a lot of other responsibilities, but first and foremost, we're a planning organization. These are planning, ethics, and professional conduct. I do think they're important. I do like the addition below. It simplifies a lot of things as well. But my preference would be to keep the AICP Code of Ethics reference that we have in here.
Okay, please come. Any discussion? Okay, for sake of time, I'm gonna go ahead and call the roll then, starting out with Kellen,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Baker. Yes. Nick,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Alexa,
Yes.
Brett. Yes. John,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Walker. Yes. And Bill. Yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. Last call for any amendments. We're back to the main motion as amended 5 times. Okay, I'm gonna call the question then on the main motion as amended. And again, the main motion is to recommend the policy board adopt the edits in the document as presented and then as amended by the technical committee here today. So we'll start with Nick,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Yes.
Alexa,
Yes. Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Kellen,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
and Jacob. Yes. Okay, thanks, everybody. Okay, let's move on the agenda to old business item 7C, letter to the US EPA. And congressional delegation of transportation sanctions and the Clean Air Act. Close your eyes, everybody, while I scroll them. Okay, here we go. So this begins on page 64 in the packet. I did receive some assistance in reviewing this letter. And got some suggested changes to kind of the approach of the letter. As I presented this to you all last month. And just as a reminder, the technical committee recommended postponing this letter until I could reach out to a few folks and get some feedback. The original approach was to ask that some amendments would be made to the Clean Air Act itself in the US code. And then changes in corresponding regulations. The new approach, which would be a very heavy lift, literally an act of Congress to change language in the Clean Air Act. Regulations are a little bit easier, but this approach gets down into the implementation and rules around implementation of the fine particulate air quality standards. And so it would be a modification that could be done, I believe, at the discretion of the EPA administrator to modify the implementation rule that would allow us to basically qualify our emissions as being de minimis in our area, and the transportation control measures that would need to be in the state implementation plan would have that de minimis qualification such that we could qualify for a protected finding from any future conformity freeze. So anyways, we modified this letter. It's kind of read across all the pages here, to focus on that and then take out the language that specifically reference making amendments to US code and the Code of Federal Regulations. And Nick, did you want to speak to any of that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jackson, and that's a really good introduction. I think you captured the highlights, and so I'll just really reiterate those. That you know, strategically thinking about trying to make some meaningful changes where we, you know, have a good probability of making those changes and, you know, getting the outcome that we want. I thought it was better to focus on the CFR, so the regulations that EPA can make at the agency level. As you noted, it's a little bit easier lift to get the agency to do something other than, you know, rather than trying to get Congress to do to actually change laws. And so where we would target that is specifically with the approvability piece, because sanctions and the conformity freeze do not come into play unless EPA proposes to disapprove the SIP. And from the state's perspective, working with the SIP, a lot of the approvability issues that we came about, nearly all of the approvability issues that we came about were in determining what control measures were mandatory. And that the biggest points of argument were the state did not want to implement control measures that didn't actually move the needle and help us clean the air. And so these, you know, targeted changes would resolve, you know, some of those issues by putting in some common sense de minimis requirements that basically say if a control measure doesn't do anything to actually solve the problem, then you don't need to implement it and you're not going to trigger sanctions because of it. And so that's just kind of the simplistic the form of what I'm trying to accomplish with that. And then I will see if there's any questions from the rest of the technical committee members.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions from committee members on the updated letter? Yes, Colin.
I have one question, probably to you, Nick. Just super high level, can you go through just what the process is for revising CFRs? My understanding is it's just the agency level, but there's something that happens internally, and I just don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's a good question, and there's a lot that happens internally. It has to go on a proposed notice of rulemaking, and that's how the EPA would start doing that work. And then that way, there's a certain amount of time that folks have to get ready for it, and then EPA internally through OAQPS will start working through updating the rule and working with stakeholders. Then they'll propose, then there will be usually a 60-day comment period. And then a lot of people will comment, then they'll get that back, and it'll take them another year or so after that to actually come out with the final rule. And then once it comes out, most of these are litigated, so they'll go to court for a little while before they're actually finalized. So it's still a pretty lengthy process, but something that's feasible.
Nick? Any other questions for Nick and myself on the letter? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item here today? Check folks online, do? Not online? Any in person? Okay, public comment period is closed. I'll now entertain a motion on the revised letter.
I'll move to approve and send it to the policy board.
Nick, is there a second?
I'll second.
Brett? Okay. Any discussion or debate? All right, we'll just go ahead and call the question. Is there anyone opposed to advancing the letter as revised to the policy board? Hearing no one opposed, we'll consider that motion approved then. And thank you for your assistance, Nick. Okay, we're on to item 8A, new business, draft Interior Alaska transportation plan, which begins on page 67 in your packet. We have a presentation by Sarah Lisa.
Do you want me to stand up here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Nice to see you all again. I think this is the third time I've talked to this group, and we're now in our final draft of the Interior Alaska Transportation Plan. I'm Sarah Lucy, I'm the project manager for this and the planning manager on our Northern Region DOT field office. And so our draft right now is undergoing the public comment period, which is open through May 18th. So I wanted to run this quick presentation by you to see if you had any initial comments, but also just to bring it to your attention that we are on our final piece of this plan update. Jackson, if you don't mind, thank you. So just a recap of our long range planning process. We're working with our state guidance and federal guidance and our overlapping goals for economic vitality, safety and security, accessibility and mobility, integration and connectivity across roads, and preservation of our existing system. And then we use our state long range plan, policy goals and objectives as guidance, and our strategic highway safety plan objectives as well. And that all filters down to our regional plans. And as a recap, we have 6 regional plans in the state that feed up to our long range plan. And that has a 20-year planning horizon typically, and that's what we're observing in our interior plan as well. And we are working on our 10-year plan update. So the last update was done in 2010, and this is our current effort. Slide please. So these were our overall plan goals. Within each of these goals, we had several objectives. These goals were put together through public engagement. Our interior plan working group met over the course of the entire effort. I think we just have meeting 4 or 5 to put together these goals, but then working through different efforts as part of the plan, including resiliency, a review of our project list, and our final draft. So again, like they kind of look pretty similar to those overlapping goals between our state and federal guidance. None of these are really new, but just a recap of what the plan focused on and what guided our efforts. So on behalf of these efforts, here are some issues and needs I pulled from the plan specifically. We came up with all kinds of little specific ones, but I just want to put these on the board for you. These are region-wide issues and needs in our bridging the gaps section of our final draft. Key issues for the surface transportation include things like our wayside amenities, which I know that we've talked about a little bit, non-motorized facilities, data gaps as we're doing road inventories and especially in our rural and remote communities, and non-motorized facilities. We have some data gaps there that we would eventually like to fill. Some forecasting tools. We would love to have a statewide traffic and travel demand model tool that we could use on a more consistent rolling basis. And of course, keeping focused on recreation and tourism access for our communities and the region. Maintenance and operations, of course, that's what we heard as one of our main focus points from all public engagement. Please maintain our roads. That was a big one for us, and the airport maintenance, of course. Keeping the runways useful, keeping the lighting up to date, and having those weather and safety operation systems in place. And waterways, lots of erosion and washout in our interior communities. We heard a lot about that. And funding opportunities and limitations, again, especially for remote and rural communities, having access to that technical assistance to use funding and find it for working on projects and keeping up with constantly replacing, maintaining, or building new infrastructure. So we took from our bridging the gap section, which is our regional needs, looking at the entire region, and here's the map of our plan boundaries. We broke those up into subregions so we could focus in on those subregions by socioeconomics. We did a little forecasting, we did a little research, resiliency research within each of these subregions. And we also looked at economic drivers for each of these subregions. So then we came up with our capital investments for each of these regions. Just a small handful of projects. We started, I think I mentioned in our last meeting update for you all that, we started our list with over 1,000 needs in the interior. So we were able to sort of run those through a culling process and a public engagement process, and then came up with these smaller lists per subregion. And just as a recap, the Interior Alaska Plan does omit the MPA because the MPA does their own planning. So projects that are within the MPA are listed in the MTP, and then we are responsible for the outside of that boundary. So, I think you'll notice one of the projects not on this list is, what's coming up here, the Chena Flood Control Bridge. That might be an obvious one for this list, but, we decided as part of this culling process and creating the list that we didn't want to put in projects that had scheduled for construction in 2025, 26-ish. So anything far enough along, because by the time we publish this plan, then it would be outdated. The project would already be done. So I guess first, my question for you all. I had a conversation this morning about maybe some regionally significant projects that might need to go in this list. Are there anything off the top of your head that might be missing from this list? And think about the next 20-year planning horizon outside of the MPA. Off the top of your head? Okay, well, you think on it for a minute. So this is Middle Yukon, so now this is Upper Tanana, and same thing, we've identified some projects that are coming up here soon. We've sort of identified some of these in the STIP already, but also things like the Taylor Highway Corridor Study. The Taylor Highway could use some attention, but some prioritized attention. So we've recommended things like corridor study in a couple different places in the interior region, just to do some more specific study efforts on particular roadways or highways. The Tok Junction Airport was one of the projects that came out of the Upper Tanana Airport Planning Study. So we rolled those priorities into this. And then general maintenance and rehabilitation in this region as well.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Do you mind going back to the Middle Yukon?
Sure.
Question.
Mhm.
And I'll maybe preface it a little bit. Several of our planning efforts going back, I think the first time it appeared within one of our 90s transportation plans, a connection between the Richardson Highway and Chena Hot Springs Road.
Mm.
And it's cascaded into a number of more plans, including our recently adopted road plan. With the preface of it being a quote unquote future study area, and that it would really fall under DOT's realm for a project of that size and that scale. Do you know if there was any conversation about a project like that, or if you've received any comments regarding that?
I'll have to go back and look to double check, but in my recollection from the last 2 years.
Okay.
I can certainly add it in, especially into the appendix. We took, our criteria set was really based off of the plan goals and objectives, and the commissioner's strategic investment areas. So we had to make sure that it ran through at least 3 of each. But if nothing else, we want to make sure it's on our needs list for the year.
Okay.
One quick question. So as the Interior Alaska, this transportation plan was developed, it seems to be focusing on roads, airports, and waterways. So is rail specifically excluded because there's gonna be an update to the state rail plan?
Yeah, we had a conversation with Brian already too. As part of his public comment that he's provided, at least verbally, and I think hopefully written as well. We have an appendix for all of the rail needs in the interior region. And we were tentatively cautious about putting in specific projects because the rail plan is going to be updated soon. So we did have a conversation with Brian though about bringing those more to the forefront of each of these subregions. And so that is in our plans to review between the public comment, the end of the public comment period and the final draft, just to insert some more rail into each of these subregions and more mention of them. Because especially in the interior, it is it is a need.
Sorry, the warm up.
Oh, that's good, that's good. Okay, and go ahead, Jackson, to the next one, if you don't mind. So that was the end. It was a very brief presentation. We have a QR code here. Our story map is really the best resource for a quick review, if you're willing and able to do that. If you want to go more in depth, the final draft, it's really an executive summary sort of feel. Like 80 pages, I think. Lots of graphics and charts. That's also up for review, and then deeper than that, our technical memos fed the final draft. So each of the technical memos dove into the modes and resiliency and our socioeconomics specifically. So if you're looking for more in-depth research on any of those things, the technical memos are where to go for that. But the final draft is what we're looking at modifying and publishing at the end of the public comment period, which ends May 18th. Perfect.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Any final questions for Sarah?
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then to our last action item for us today. This is item 8B, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee Roles and Responsibilities. It's because on page 74 in the packet. As I did a preview of last month and introduced to my staff report, there are some requested changes from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. First one of which is changing their name to the Walk and Roll Advisory Committee, or RAC. And really the reason why they wanted to change their name, not to make it more catchy, though it is more catchy, I think, than the name that they came up with, but was to be more inclusive across different modes of transportation, as not just focusing on bicyclists and pedestrians, but folks that use e-bikes and scooters, transit, use a school bus, and transportation services for seniors and folks with disabilities, and folks that do have mobility impairments that have to use things like wheelchairs or walkers, et cetera. So they're really wanting to broaden their horizon of the different users and transportation modes that they focus on. So that's where the kind of the title change rolls into the vision statement being expanded to explain that. And then in the middle section there, we added in some additional transportation plans that we develop here at Fast Planning that this committee works on when we do our updates of those plans. And then on the next page, this is where they had made the motion, the two more motions here. One is to add 4 additional seats to the committee, one for law enforcement, one for the school district, one for transit, and one for people with disabilities. And then at the bottom there, changing their meeting frequency from every month to every other month, with the opportunity to, call special meetings or have work sessions as, say, product design reviews, things like that, that come up. So, in any event, we're hoping to advance this to the policy board later this month. Are there any questions? Yes, Don.
The proposed added seats would be just full voting membership.
That's what was discussed, yes. They could be considered ex officio though. That could be a recommendation from the technical committee. Bob, question? Go ahead.
Yeah, are we going to get a chance to amend this document now with motions?
Yeah, the technical committee can make any amendments you wish, once we have a main motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item today? None online? None in person? Okay, we'll close the public comment period. And I'll now entertain a motion. Motion to approve. Okay, move to approve by Brett. Is there a second?
Second,
Thanks, Bob. Okay, discussion. Or amendments.
yeah, Jackson, on the last page, page 75, under meetings and duration,
Yes,
do you know what is meant by scoring there? Are they going to be scoring projects like the technical committee does?
sort of. So what the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee does is that from all of the non-motorized project nominations to us for the fast improvement program, they do score those and rank them. So that in that ranking of those projects is provided to the subcommittee that works on the fast improvement program. So they're the body that selects those. They have a much smaller set of scoring criteria than the technical committee does, but yeah, this is not for big tip projects. This is just to prioritize and rank the non-motorized nominations for the fast improvement program to help you all out with your decisions.
Do they prioritize projects with the scoring method?
Yes,
Thank you.
Bill?
This might seem picayune, but I'm not in favor with the name change. I think it detracts from credibility. Naming your business or your organization or your band, something that's credible, especially if you're serious about what you're doing. You do it here today, and especially I think that detracts from people who are opposed to our mission. So it might be a small thing, it might not be. I'm not in favor of changing. But I would like to make a motion to not change that.
Okay. Bill has made a motion to not change the name. Is there a second to that motion?
Second that.
Thank you, Callan. Okay. Do you have anything else to add to that, or we open it up for discussion?
I think that is my point.
Okay, well, thank you, Bill. Yeah, go ahead,
I'll
Callan.
just play off of what Bill started. I appreciate you bringing that amendment forward. I really do agree with that too, that this committee does a lot. And I think, especially if we're bringing it to the policy board or in instances to the potentially the state legislature, when we were talking about the AAC changes, it would just bring a little more credibility if it wasn't, I hate to say it, a fun name or the serious name.
Okay, thanks, Callan. Further discussion or debate on the amendment? Okay, I want to call a roll then. Starting out with Bill,
Yes.
Callan,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob. Yes. Nick,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Alexa,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Walker.
Yes.
Wow, unanimous to not change the name. Okay. Any other amendments? Yes, Callan.
I'm gonna preface this amendment by saying I'm not tied to it, and I really appreciate feedback from other committee members. So my amendment is on the representatives to clarify that the 4 added seats are ex officio and shall not count against quorum.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second,
Thank you, Bob. Okay, like to speak to that?
I will, again, as I mentioned, I'm open to being convinced. It seems like the policy committee, or sorry, the policy board has been giving us some direction to look at the size of some of our committees. This is really kind of going against how we set this committee up, with every organization getting specific representatives, which could be all of those below seats if those organizations wanted to. In addition, like very similar to maybe our law enforcement representative here, that it's very valuable for them to give input on certain things. And then we just kind of won't need input for a long time. So I wouldn't want to run into quorum issues because we have new seats and maybe they don't have a specific interest in what's on the agenda, especially with more specific meetings. But then obviously, like the school district could add a lot of positive input to like that Fifth Avenue project we're working on. So that's my spiel to this, but I'm open to being convinced otherwise.
Okay, thanks, Kellen. Discussion or debate on this amendment? Okay, seeing that, I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, did you?
Yeah, sorry, I may just be missing it, but does it say in here what? Or anywhere what forum is, what number they need to? Reach the forum?
I don't think so, but majority of members have to be present.
Okay.
We don't have a specific number.
Okay,
So, because we do have 2 seat vacancies currently on this committee. Okay, I'm gonna call the roll on the amendment to make the 4 additional seats ex officio. There's something else on top of that, ex officio and not counting as quorum.
Yeah, and maybe I could, or actually, I meant to say something a little different. Maybe I could propose an amendment to that.
Sure.
That it would be non-voting ex officio members and not counting as quorum. So my amendment is to add non-voting specify.
Bill, Bob, you did the second. Do you agree with that
Yes.
friendly amendment? Okay, we're good to go. Is everybody clear on the amendment now? Okay, I'm gonna call the roll then, starting with Kellen.
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob? Yes. Nick,
Yes.
Steven,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Alexa,
Yes.
Brett? Yes. John? Yes. Bob?
Yes.
Walker? Yes. And Bill?
Yes.
Okay, that amendment passes. We're back to the main motion as amended twice. Any further amendments? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna call the question then on the main motion as amended. See, we're gonna start out with Brett. Yes. John?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Kellen?
Yes.
RJ?
Yes.
Jacob?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And Alexa?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That passes. Okay, moving on to item 8C, the Fast Improvement Program, pages 76 to 78. In your meeting packet here, this was added to the agenda at the request of Kellen. And I believe John Ataris would like to speak to this as well, but I guess from my overview here real quick, the 2025 program is moving forward. Hopefully we'll get out to bid after we see an approval on STIP amendment number 2 and STIP amendment number 1. But I think we need to take a new look at our 2026 priorities. There is additional funding in 2026 to where we could raise the amount of funding for construction, perhaps add another $1 million to the 26 program. We also know that there's at least one city street nomination. I think that the city's self-funding with capital funds to get reconstructed this summer, and so we would like to see the city nominate another road to replace the one that was funded for 26. And then I believe John would like to see, you know, a larger list here so that we can start putting together a list for 2027 construction. And then also there's been an issue with the delay in getting match and maintenance agreement signed, which has caused some delays and potentially including or not including those specific locations in the bid package that will be going out. So in any event, I was just hoping for an open discussion on this here today. And then I will have to commit to sending out a doodle poll to have everybody that's interested in looking at this program and nominating new project sites. For us all to meet on this, probably something like in early June, but give you a month's time or so to prepare your nominations to bring to that future meeting. And then, Kellen, you asked for this to be on the agenda, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit, and I'm dividing my thoughts into two different categories. I'm gonna speak to the 2022 program first. First, I want to say a big thank you to John and his team. Did an incredible job designing this, including the projects. It is very much herding cats with a lot of times 4 different municipalities here that have different processes they need to go through. But we ran into a little bit of a complication this year. And I think most of you know, the borough process is a little bit cumbersome because we don't have road powers. So we have to actually go through the service areas of the assembly to get a sign match and maintenance agreement, which takes a little bit of time with those public hearings. But I was a little bit surprised that the agreements came out quite a bit later this year. And my understanding was that there was some problems with the language, potentially violating federal regulations that got held up a little bit internally with DOT for maybe 6 months or so. That's kind of caused this delay. So the soonest we can get our match and maintenance through the assembly now is June 12th, which we're advertising after that. We've lost a whole construction season. So I'm trying to figure out, first off, my main goal is how we don't have this happen again. Like, that's just very unfortunate all the way around. And a big part of it is our process. So I'll take ownership for that. So that's my first thing on potentially getting the conversation going. But the second part of it, I think John's came up with a good solution to get all the projects out. Unfortunately, with the bid process, advertising, certifying, it doesn't sound like anything's going to be constructed this year. They'll all be constructed next year. Correct me if I'm wrong after I'm done. But just any other way of that, maybe I'm not looking at this right, that, adding the borough projects as additive alternatives or contingency. I'm just not in the contracting world. And I'd hope there'd be a way to get this out a little bit sooner to potentially get some work on the street this year, because I know the contracting community is hurting a bit this year. So I'm talking about something I don't know a lot about, especially with the bid process and the whatever you call it, ability to certify. So that, I guess that's my comments, but again, getting a little bit outside of my area of expertise.
Oh, so, yeah, sure, I'll talk. So, yeah, the last thing we're waiting on is the match and maintenance agreements from the borough. Parks and Rec, was our contact there for the projects in the FAST 2025. And, it was kind of a perfect storm of the borough, process taking a while, and then DOT also internally reviewing our MOA processes as well. So, to make sure they comply with federal regulations and guidelines and such. So, and for our particular 2025 projects, it's likely that once those match and maintenance agreements are signed and over to DOT, mid-June, then we can advertise an award and then TP to the contractor, which generally takes 2 months. So that puts us at mid-August, which is around the end of the construction season. And then that brings up one concern that I had, which was one of the city streets. They're having Eighth Avenue is having a utility company rip it up and leave it in a gravel state. And so I wanted to mention that there's a possibility that we're not coming through at the end of summer or in the fall and paving that. So that's just my main concern now, that most of this work is likely gonna be pushed out into 2026. I've looked into every avenue of contracting schemes and none of them worked out, like the additive alternates and stuff. All of them still need the same match and maintenance agreement. And, you know, need the money in place for us to be able to advertise. So, I apologize. I wish, you know, I heard that there may have been extra special ways to get this onto the assembly, sooner. But we were going through our normal avenues of, talking with the, you know, borough delegates, the Parks and Recs representatives. So generally, with all the entities I work with, those folks, you know, Parks and Recs reps, and then, with the cities, I work with the engineering departments, and with, UAF, I work also with the engineering department. So each entity has a contact that we, me, Randy Bailey, and those select individuals work together to get these matching agreements. And maybe there's a process there that could be improved. One thing I've seen is, Randy has sent me like a list of dates, like get me this stuff by this date or this date or this date, so that it can make it onto the assembly meeting of this date, that date, or the other date. So that's really helpful too. I'm generally aware of those dates, but it helps for planning purposes too, knowing a list of when you need this stuff. I kind of like when Jackson asks us, you know, for stuff that needs to go into the packet. So it's just kind of a similar deal there. But unfortunately, it's kind of a perfect storm, but I do want to hear from Bob or Phil on that 8th Avenue. What I can do is if it's possibly NCP to the contractor mid-August, we could prioritize 8th Avenue to be paved by using an interim completion date in our project of this year, but we can't guarantee it at this point. Is there a second thing I need to talk about?
No, well, I don't know.
Okay.
I was again, and maybe Bob or Bill could add something to this. If there was just any creative way of advertising this now prior to the assembly action.
No.
Could you leave the borough projects off of it, get it sooner
Yes.
with the thought of maybe putting those next year if they're really not gonna happen until next year?
Yeah,
And be able
so
to do everything this summer.
it'll buy us about 3 weeks of time, which is, you know, coming back from August, which does give time to actually construct things if we do leave those borough projects off, but I think it's still risky either way now to pull those projects. Then it messes up with the funding and stuff too. Gotta reprogram those dollars into the 26 project. But yeah, that is a possibility, but I think from my conversations with the borough or Kellen, it was like they really didn't want that stuff dropped out of the project.
Bob, go ahead.
So, do I understand that, 8th Avenue is gonna be going to construction this year as far as the DOT portion?
Around mid to late August, we could prioritize in the 25 project, getting that road done, because I know it'll be left in a gravel state if your utility contractor comes through, but I can't guarantee.
Yeah, John, the utility contract will be done by July 10th. So you can advertise 8th Avenue, the DOT portion right now for an NTP at that date, correct?
The PDA just went down to statewide and federal highways, so in about 4 to 6 weeks, we can advertise.
Why did the PDA go down just now?
because we just got the tip amendment completed. Sorry,
There wasn't funding for Eighth Avenue all along?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
We increased funding from 1 million to 2.1 million late in the game to add a bunch of priorities, but go ahead, keep talking. I guess.
well, I'm just, there's been a lot of coordination. There's a couple of different funding sources. There was DOT funding sources for the design. And then there was GHU funding sources for the design and construction of utilities, and the gas company coordinating with funding sources for their gas line going in. And so there is no sense doing all the utility work because we can't leave that road gravel through the winter. So this has all been fairly coordinated. I'm kind of surprised to hear that Eighth Avenue isn't funded for construction this year. Maybe we should talk later.
Sure, yeah, all these are bundled into one project. If we want to fund them singularly, it would be insanely expensive and not have any economies of scale. That's the whole point of the program, so. But then this year it's going.
All right, thank
Yep. Speaking of future priorities, so I do have newer numbers and stuff that I could share with y'all. And I did have questions, one for Bob. Can you confirm the project that the city took on themselves?
What was that, John?
Can you confirm which project you had taken on yourselves?
Joist.
Yeah.
We were going to, the city was going to fund the reconstruction of the roadway.
Okay, and then secondly, we have Gaffney Road sidewalk in the 2026 priorities. I was wondering if we wanted to keep that in there, considering there's contaminated soils, possible utility and possible right-of-way impacts.
Yeah, that's always been something to more or less avoid. But I think I'm going to get input from Public Works. But if we do Joyce this year, like there's no reason not to, then we would probably want to extend Shannon Drive work. I would think taking it further along to replace, instead of doing Joyce, we would just do Shannon Drive further. But we've got a month to decide that, correct? Or at least a few weeks to decide that, and I can get input from others.
That's correct. The sooner the better, because we are getting into the environmental process, which takes a while, and we've taken all these 26 priorities and put that into the document, as well as the contingency projects, Belane Road, Andrea Drive, Old Airport Way, and Summit Drive.
Okay, I can get it to you in just a couple of days then, John. But we'll
That
be
sounds
over
good.
there, Shannon Drive. We'll be an extension of Shannon Drive. Makes the most sense for efficiency, mob and demob.
Yeah, okay, sounds good, but I think Gaffney Road sidewalk, it's our opinion right now, the DOT is to remove that one if we can, because the complications that are gonna come of it.
So we between the adding funding of 139,000 for Gaffney and the 454 that we don't have to provide Joyce Drive, if that funding was added to complete Shannon Drive, that would probably be the best way to go.
Okay, good, thank you. And then I'm for a subcommittee meeting or something where we have to go more into depth with this stuff.
Yeah, I'll try to schedule one for, like, say, the first week of June,
Okay,
so that everybody has time to prepare nominations, discuss these projects. Okay, so we are 4 minutes past 2:00. Any final discussion points on this topic?
I'll just make one. You could tell I'm a little frustrated, and I get why everyone else is frustrated at the borough too. We're delaying the project. I guess this is, well, I think one of the main roles I look at the technical committee for, that all of us are at the table here and we're all in this canoe together. And if we started talking back in March on this, we could have came up with a solution, by April or May, and got this thing out on the street. So I guess my ask going forward the next couple of years, if there's ever a snag or an issue with this program, let's let's start talking. Maybe every March, this is an agenda item on our committee level. Like if we knew there was a problem with the MOAs before, whatever, 3 weeks ago, we could have worked through that as a group and saw how the dominoes are lining up with losing a whole construction season on that. So I look at that as one of our main roles and responsibilities, and I'll bring the agenda item up if I have to. We need to start talking early because this has happened too many times.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, John.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna conclude that conversation for now, and provided we're a couple minutes past, I would entertain a motion to postpone the informational items on the agenda and adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Colin. Is there a second? Second, second by Kate. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned at 2:05 PM. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you, sir. Keep going. We know.